Story 1. As someone who spent a lot of time around 2005 trying to explain it to very skeptical people, I would say Wikipedia. Story 2. A plane has crashed in the jungles of New Guinea. 3 survivors found a village and managed to establish communication. There is no runway for a plane to land or take off, and helicopters cannot reach the valley. I have an idea. We will airdrop medical personnel and supplies for a glider, assemble the glider, and slingshot it into the air. Then we will catch it with a tow plane. It worked. Story 3. In the 1700s, a man named Timothy Dexter had several unusual trading successes. He shipped bed warmers to the Caribbean. They were bought by the molasses industry for use as ladles and earned him a handsome profit. He shipped mittens to the same region. Asian merchants purchased them for resale in Siberia. He shipped coal to Newcastle, a major coal mining area, arrived during a miners' strike, and made a large profit. He repeated the mitten shipment to the South Seas and arrived in time to sell them to Portuguese traders bound for China. Story 4. What, sir? Would you make a ship sail against the wind and currents by lighting a bonfire under her deck? I pray you excuse me. I have no time to listen to such nonsense. Napoleon Bonaparte regarding the steam engine. Story 5. Dropping a large number of cats by parachute over Borneo to stop the spread of the plague. Story 6. Attempting to cure syphilis with malaria. Saying it worked brilliantly is a stretch. Story 7. Let us drive a car equipped with a global positioning system and a camera down every street on Earth. Story 8. The way they extracted those children from the cave in Thailand was remarkable. A diver who was also an anesthesiologist was consulted and joined the effort. It was incredibly lucky to find someone with that combination of skills. He initially said it was a terrible idea, but when presented with the other options he realized it was their best choice. They successfully rescued all the children and their coach. Story 9. Rumor has it that the founder of Federal Express received a C on a college paper describing his proposed business. The professor believed no one would use the service because the United States Postal Service already provided it at lower cost. Story 10. Cats is a Broadway musical. It is a nonsensical fever dream about aroused cat people competing to die and be reborn. Yes, that is the plot insofar as Cats has one, and it is based on a book of brief, whimsical poems by Thomas Stearns Eliot that are not related to each other aside from being about cats. The show consists of cat people introducing themselves and rubbing against each other for several hours, and then one of them ascends, also known as dying. To date, Cats has grossed over $1 billion worldwide. Story 11. Apparently, someone was shooting fish out of a moving plane into a lake. Story 12. Curing deadly, previously incurable infections that had caused the early deaths of billions throughout human history using mold. Story 13. During the Battle of Leyte Gulf in World War II, the United States Navy was escorting the invasion force to the Philippines when they sighted what appeared to be the main Japanese fleet. The larger ships changed course to pursue, leaving the invasion force guarded only by destroyers and escort carriers. It was a trap. The real Japanese fleet then appeared to attack, and on paper the United States forces were in a hopeless position. Instead of retreating, the United States destroyers charged the Japanese and fought so ferociously that the Japanese, believing the United States force to be larger than it actually was, withdrew even though they held the advantage. Story 14. The Sims computer game sounded like the most foolish idea. Who would want to control a sim character doing all the mundane tasks we do every day? How boring. But I played The Sims obsessively, and the later versions as well. Story 15. A film based on a true story about a man who got his arm stuck under a rock in a cave for 127 hours. Surprisingly watchable. Danny Boyle is a hell of a director and producer. Story 16. Selling bottled water in places where tap water is both free and better regulated used to be a joke. Story 17. It was a movie rental company that mailed you digital versatile discs. I thought it was the worst idea when it first came out because I could drive 5 minutes to Blockbuster and get whatever I wanted. Story 18. Toast. Hey, let's take something we've already finished baking and heat it up again. The person who first came up with it must have sounded crazy. Story 19. Louis Brennan was the inventor of the gyroscopic monorail. His monorail was a single-track train that used a gyroscopic balancing system to remain upright. The designs appeared unconventional on paper but were highly innovative, safe for passengers, and reportedly faster than conventional trains of the time. Story 20. Okay everyone, here is my business plan. People will give me perfectly good items for free. I will resell them for money, profit. This is also known as operating a thrift store such as Value Village. Story 21. Wikipedia. In a world with Encyclopedia Britannica and Encarta funded by the giant parent Microsoft, who comes up with the idea to have people contribute their expertise for free? The classic line about it is great in practice, but it would never work in theory. Story 22. Slowing down a product can actually improve customer confidence in it. Most website loading bars are artificial animations added because people often do not trust a site that returns data immediately. A clear example is tax preparation software. It can generate forms almost instantly after you click submit, but it shows a loading animation and messages about verifying and checking because users would not believe the result if it appeared immediately. This practice is common among web developers and is more effective than you might expect. The problem is that once you become aware of it, it becomes annoying and you start noticing it everywhere. Story 23. Once upon a time I had a headache. My boyfriend at the time suggested taking a shower by candlelight. My first thought was that showering in near darkness was a stupid idea, immediately followed by a desire to try it. It actually worked. I married him to keep access to his good ideas and his pancakes. Story 24. The oblique wing. Anyone know about the Grumman F-14 Tomcat fighter? During the Cold War, aerospace firms wanted aircraft that could operate efficiently at both subsonic and supersonic speeds, so they developed variable sweep wings. To fly slower, pilots swept the wings forward. To fly faster, they swept them back. The problem with variable sweep wings was that they required very complex machinery to move the wings and keep wing-mounted weapons properly aligned. All this added weight, more failure points, more maintenance, and greater stress on the airframe. An alternative was proposed. Mount the wing on a single pivot and turn it so it ran nearly parallel to the fuselage. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration asked Boeing and other aeronautical firms to study the concept, which became known as the oblique wing. Wind tunnel tests indicated the design would theoretically perform very well, so the National Aeronautics and Space Administration built the AD-1 oblique wing research aircraft to test the idea. It was bare bones. No fly-by-wire controls, no hydraulic flight controls, and no onboard computers. Aside from a few unique control characteristics, it flew well. Those control characteristics could be addressed with a fly-by-wire system. When first proposed, the oblique wing was met with scoffing. Testing showed significant potential. The AD-1 oblique wing research aircraft never crashed. The program ended because of conservatism in the aviation industry, not because of an accident. Story 25. Do not let a person who has been starving eat too much at once. Controlled feeding over several days prevents refeeding syndrome, a potentially fatal condition caused by rapid reintroduction of food after prolonged starvation. Story 26. Nobody is going to play your silly little Java game with outdated graphics about digging up blocks. Story 27. In a mythical meeting with oil company executives, someone proposed taking a jet engine, mounting it on a tank chassis, connecting it to a huge water supply with high-capacity pipes and powerful pumps, and using it to put out oil well fires. Someone else said, "Get this idiot out of here." Story 28. Fiddler on the Roof. It was not an easy pitch. Who wants to see a play about a group of Jewish people from long ago who are expelled from a town in Russia? Is that fun? Story 29. Laser-assisted in situ keratomileusis eye surgery. Imagine telling the first recipient that they would have a laser aimed directly at their eye to improve their vision and asking them to trust that it would not destroy them. Story 30. So I'm going to make a movie about the 2008 financial crash. Okay. I'm going to explain all the jargon and why it happened. Okay, but won't people be bored? Not if I have Margot Robbie explaining naked in a bubble bath. Okay, you have my attention. It will be great, and it will have Christian Bale, Ryan Gosling, Steve Carell, Selena Gomez, and Brad Pitt. Some movie executives, probably. The Big Short is excellent. I have seen it 3 times now. Story 31. Back in the days when you could watch only one television show at a time and only when it was broadcast, the new season shows were announced beginning in February. Since changing the channel required getting up and walking across the room, you tended to choose a show and stick with it. I read the blurb in the television guide, a little pamphlet that came in the newspaper each week, printed on paper listing all the new series. One entry caught my eye. This was not long after Close Encounters of the Third Kind had come out, and Creatures from Space were the next big thing for Hollywood. The blurb described a new show about an alien who crash-landed on Earth and lives with an ordinary American girl. I thought that sounded like the stupidest show ever to come out of network television, so I gave it a miss and watched something else for a few months. Then one night a special had bumped my regular program, so I checked what else was on. I found Mork and Mindy. Robin Williams was hilarious, and Mindy was an amazing straight man. It was incredible. I had never seen anything like it. Now I would go back and watch all the previous episodes, but back then that was simply inconceivable. Story 32. Arguably, ride-sharing. What? Strangers drive you, and they do not even have a medallion. Story 33. When I was a teenager, I thought The Lion King sounded stupid. Disney had just regained massive relevance with several successful fairy tales in a row that made a lot of money, so why were they doing an animal story I had never heard of? I had not seen it yet and did not realize it was essentially a lion Hamlet. It, of course, made a fortune. Story 34. I read a newspaper article about a man who walked into his local convenience store and bought 2 lottery tickets. Most people would play different numbers on each ticket to double their small chances of winning. Not him, he played the same numbers on both tickets. It turned out he had the winning numbers for that drawing, and he owned 2 of the 3 winning tickets. That entitled him to 2/3 of the jackpot instead of just half. Story 35. Blowing powdered smallpox sores up your nose to prevent smallpox. Story 36. I do not agree with this personally because I love Bob, but many people said that casting Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man was a terrible idea at the time. Story 37. Escape rooms sound silly on paper. You lock yourself in a room and solve puzzles, but in real life they're actually a lot of fun. Story 38. Okay, hear me out. It's a video game about 2 Italian plumbers who stomp on turtles. They travel through giant sewer pipes and break bricks to release mushrooms, which they eat to grow bigger. Story 39. Rage Against the Machine. A Mexican vocalist raps while another musician plays guitar with his hands and various tools. They perform political songs. Story 40. Trimming trees with 10 circular saw blades attached to a metal bar dangling from a helicopter. Story 41. Some people thought others would be interested in renting their bedrooms to strangers. This is how Airbnb was born. Story 42. The David S. Pumpkins bit on Saturday Night Live would have been a forgettable dud with anyone other than Tom Hanks in the title role. Story 43. Rub some pus into someone's open wound. That will help them. Oversimplified, but that is how smallpox vaccination started and stopped 10 to 20% of the population from dying. Thanks, Edward Jenner. Story 44. I had a friend who was an aspiring screenwriter. He told me he knew someone who had been hired to write a screenplay based on a Disneyland ride featuring pirates. I thought he was joking. Story 45. I was working for a company called Landmark, which had a large and successful chain of newspapers. They were like the internet, printed on large sheets of paper and delivered once a day. When they launched the Weather Channel, I thought, who in the world would watch a channel that shows only the weather? Story 46. On paper, the idea of selling empty boxes may seem absurd and pointless. In reality, there is a successful business that offers empty boxes for gift packaging and storage. People buy them for shipping, moving, and to wrap mysterious presents. Story 47. Imagine Twister but with sharks. We will call it Sharknado. People will love it. Story 48. Pretty much any modern surgery involves administering drugs to render a person unconscious, then opening the body and operating inside to repair or improve it. If you had no idea that surgery was even possible, you would think that anyone suggesting it was insane or a sick psychopath who needs to be locked up for life. Story 49. Boy George mentioned a global concert to Bob Geldof, with the top acts of the time performing for free for charity. It was an impossible undertaking with not a moment to spare, but what we got was Live Aid. Story 50. Making a Broadway musical based on Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats. Story 51. Honestly, Super Mario Bros. Is about a plumber who jumps on weird mushroom people and turtles to save a princess from a larger turtle. This should not have worked, and yet it is one of the biggest franchises of all time. Story 52. While working on the movie Idiocracy, the filmmakers asked the costume designer to find goofy, futuristic-looking shoes. He found a small company whose shoes seemed so ridiculous that nobody in their right mind would wear them. When asked what would happen if the brand suddenly took off, they said there was no way anyone would seriously buy them. The brand was Crocs. Story 53. Fight fire with fire. I saw a video of a large moving vehicle burning a long line of grass behind it to stop a wildfire from spreading. Story 54. The worldwide release of a buggy game from a niche genre for an almost dead console that cannot be completed without the help of a friend who owns the opposite version. Yet Generation 1 Pokémon sold 46 million copies, surpassing the game bundled with the console. Story 55. Take a story that is 500,000 words long and so steeped in lore that there are legitimate academic disciplines devoted to it. It is so detailed and visually demanding that adaptation was deemed impossible. Take a country so remote that almost no one visits it and transporting people or supplies is extremely expensive. A country with no entrenched film industry, not known for advanced technology or storytelling accolades, and so overlooked that it is missing from many maps. Take a director who is talented but has little recognition beyond some well-received independent films. He arrives with a network of passionate professionals who are untested outside of small projects. Take all of that and decide to film not one, not two, but 3 movies simultaneously. A feat that not only had never been done before, but where past attempts at dual film production often resulted in the failure of one or both films. On paper, it was a recipe for the sad failure of the underdogs. In reality, the Lord of the Rings trilogy tipped the tide of a cultural revolution that made high fantasy and geek culture mainstream. It pioneered technologies and perfected crafts that forever changed the film industry. It gave a huge boost to New Zealand tourism, catapulted unknown actors into stardom. It made Weta Workshop a household name and a world-class studio. On a budget of less than $300 million, the trilogy grossed $3 billion. And that is not even mentioning all the small details, happenstances, and happy accidents. It was the fortunate version of Murphy's Law. This trilogy should have failed. We are fortunate it did not. Story 56. We have too many prisoners. Where can we put them? You know that island we sent Cook to look at the eclipse? You mean the one the Dutch have known about for 100 years and said it is nothing but desert? Yes, that one. Send them there. Aren't there people already there? Yes, people already live there. Story 57. Twitter. Let's restrict users to very short messages for no particular reason. It looks dumb on paper, but it really took off and eventually devolved into an alternative right dumpster fire, though that is another story. Story 58. Lotteries? You mean a group of people will pay into a pool that gives 50% to the organizer and 50% to a random participant? Ha! Story 59. Dropping live turkeys out of a helicopter at Thanksgiving was the funniest episode ever. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.